Hi, today I'm super excited to do a quick wrap-up video. I'm going to talk about the 10 books that I read in May. What an amazing reading month May turned out to be for me. 10 books is more than I read in any single month this year or probably last year. But it's, of course, not about quantity. It's not about how many books you've read. It's about how much you enjoyed the process and how much of the material you've retained, what's going to stay with you. Are you going to recommend these books? And yes, most of the books, I'm happy to report, out of the 10 books, at least 7 were really good. Some of them incredible. And I want to rank them from the worst to the best. Now, the best is going to be very difficult. As I'm thinking about it, there's at least 5 books that could win the #1 spot in May. But the worst book of the month at number 10 is going to be really easy. So let's start with that. Ascension by Nicholas Binge. You get the honor of being the worst book that I read. And it's very unfortunate. This is a new release science fiction that I was really excited about because I knew it's combining 2 things that I really enjoy. Science fiction, but also mountains, climbing. And unfortunately, for me, it got both wrong. The science fiction was lacking. There was really nothing new in the book. But also the climbing was atrocious. The climbing ideas that were proposed in this book really showed that the author has no clue what he's writing about and did not do any research. So that was really poorly executed. The mystery, the premise of the book could have been interesting, could have been at least fun. Without anything original in it, it could have been fun. There's a mountain that appears in the middle of the ocean and a team of scientists is sent to investigate. And then things fall apart very quickly from there. The beginning I really enjoyed, and it's a fast read, I will say, if you have the book, if you're planning on reading it. In my opinion, it's an easy book to read. It's fast-paced, but it's just lacking. It gets so many things wrong about the climbing experience that for me, it was very difficult to overlook that. And then later on, things just fall apart overall with what's going on with the mystery of the mountain and what's going on the mountain and the people who are there that I couldn't care less about. It was just a difficult book to read. And the biggest problem I had with it were obvious mistakes. The biggest one of them was something that I spotted where a geologist, one of the scientists on the mountain, at one point in his brief talks about how the top of the mountain is the oldest part of the mountain and the bottom of the mountain is the youngest. And clearly that's wrong. It's reverse. It's incorrect. How could you get that wrong as an author? How come nobody caught that? I couldn't understand. I did not enjoy it. I was frustrated by it, yeah, anyway, so that's number 10. With that out of the way, we can now talk about books that I, at the very least, found interesting. At number 9, Lee Mandalow's Feed Them Silence. So this is a science fiction book that has an interesting premise. We are in the mind of a wolf. A scientist has a receiver embedded in her mind, in her brain, that allows her to perceive the world the way wolf does. See what the wolf, this particular wolf, sees. Feel what it feels. Emotional connection is developed. Very interesting. However, I didn't love everything about the book. I loved the parts when we were inside the wolf. I didn't love the parts when we were out of the wolf. I didn't like the protagonist at all. We're not meant to like this person, by the way. But it just, I don't know, the reading experience wasn't fantastic, but it was interesting and it's a short book. I didn't want it to be any longer. It was just the right size. I read it. I was glad that I did. So yeah, that's Lee Mandalow's Feed Them Silence. Good book, not great. At number 8, we have Ursula K. Le Guin's Rocannen's World. Possibly the reason why it's at number 8 and not higher up on the list is because I didn't read the book. I actually listened to it on audio. And I think this is the last time I'm going to do it just because I know myself at this point that it's not the right way for me to experience a book. My attention wanes very quickly. I'm distracted. I need to be looking at a page. I need to be visualizing the images as I'm reading, not listening to someone's voice. So I actually don't remember a whole lot about this book. I remember it was good. The reading, the author was really good, engaging, but again, not the right format for me. So let's keep it at number 8. It's a science fiction book that really blends science fiction with a lot of fantasy elements. It's an early book of Ursula K. Le Guin. It's the first one in the Hainish cycle. So I'm glad I read it because I want to read all of them at some point. There are flashes of brilliance in Ursula K. Le Guin's writing, but it does feel kind of derivative. I don't know, not everything there gelled. I really enjoyed, for example, they have these flying steeds that are kind of like a mix of Pegasus with a tiger, which really seem more fantastical than science fiction because it's an unlikely flying combo, a flying tiger with wings. So anyway, I think number 8 is fine. I did enjoy the book. I'm gonna read it again and then we'll see how I feel about it. And now I can start talking about books that I really loved. At number 7, Stanisław Lem's Return from the Stars. The original Polish title, Powrót z Gwiazd. So it's a translated work. I read it in the original Polish. Really good, really good. It was written in the 60s and it deals with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, something that's in the news right now. I was actually listening just recently to a podcast about the psychedelics and how they may be helpful in treatment of PTSD. So that's huge. And it doesn't just talk about PTSD, it deals with many different subjects. One of them is alienation. One of them is being different, being an alien among humans. Bragg is the name of our protagonist. He returns to Earth. I think it was like on this mission for 10 years. Very stressful mission. Not a war situation, but nevertheless, lots of stress on this mission. Things happened. And he returns to Earth, and on Earth, over 100 years have passed. So everyone he knew is dead, and the Earth has been changed. And the way the Earth is presented is super interesting, the changes that took place on Earth. I don't want to go into too many details, but it's really interesting. One thing, for example, Lem introduces the concept, and I believe he was the first one. I read this. This isn't my idea. I read this actually, that he was the first one to come up with a concept of a Kindle, books being downloaded onto a single device. So yeah, so that's kind of cool. The world has changed in interesting ways, and he has a very difficult time adjusting to the world. Humans are incapable of violence, for example, but is that a good thing? It seems like a utopian society, but perhaps there are shades of gray and darkness is creeping through the light of the society that was created while Bragg was among the stars. So very interesting read, a challenging book. I like it. I recommend it. It's not my favorite Lem, definitely, but I enjoyed this book. Next on the list, I believe we're at number 6. It's Jane Castrol's 5 Decembers, a book that I enjoyed immensely. Fabulous, quick, smart read, beautiful plotting. It's a historical book. It takes place during World War II. It starts right at the beginning of U.S. involvement in the conflict and goes through the end of the war. But it's about the war. For example, there's a vivid, touching first-person account of the firebombing of Tokyo, which, if you don't know, was the precursor to the atomic bomb being dropped. There was hope that firebombing of Tokyo would cause Japan to capitulate. They didn't, and then Hiroshima happened. But the book is about so much more. It's about human connection. It's about a mystery that becomes bigger. There's a police officer in Hawaii who gets a case, and this case becomes bigger and bigger as the book progresses. It's a love story. It's an amazing love story. So this is not a science fiction book in any way. It's the only book that has no science fiction elements at all, but it was amazing. I really enjoyed it. If you read a lot of sci-fi and you're looking for something to break up the, I don't want to say monotony, because science fiction is such an amazing broad genre with so many different books in it. I mean, how different is Star Wars from 1984, for example? But if you're looking for a change of pace, 5 Decembers is going to do that because it really delivers. The plot is incredible. Characters are vivid. It's well written. It's going to hook you. And there are twists. It's amazing. I really enjoyed it. It should be higher on the list, but really at this point, all these books pretty much could be number 1. So let's continue with the next one. And that happens to be Ken Liu's The Paper Menagerie. And how is this at number 5? I don't know. As I was reading the stories, I would have thought it's going to be number 1. Fabulous book of stories. A lot of them are science fiction. Some are not. So it's a great mix. Amazing stories. The Paper Menagerie story, the titular story, was fabulous. I had tears in my eyes reading it. It harkened back to my personal story, being an immigrant, thinking about my parents, for whom English language is still very much a second language, and they don't have a great grasp of it. It's a book that really connected with me. It's all about immigrant experience on many different levels. Fabulous stories. I liked so many of them. The Waves, a story about humanity leaving Earth. Just an amazing book, really well written. Ken Liu did an amazing job with these short stories. Each one, there isn't a bad one. You're gonna like some of them more than others, of course. That's just how it is with a book of short stories. They're not all gonna be equally amazing for any reader. You're gonna have your favorites, but gosh, are there so many good ones. A particular story stands out, not a science fiction story, but a story about Chinese experience in the 1900s in Idaho City. Fabulous book. I really recommend reading Paper Menagerie at number 5. Now we're getting very close to number 1. At number 4, Authority by Jeff Vandermeer. Fabulous book. Could have been number 1 easily, but it's the second book in a series. So in any case, an excellent read. I'm not going to get into the plot a whole lot because if you haven't read the first one, Annihilation, I don't want to talk about Authority. I will say it's completely different from Annihilation, but it's also exactly the same. What I loved about the original book, I loved about this one. It retains its feel, its character, its mystery, and expands, in fact, on Annihilation. I've read so many reviews where people loved the first one and didn't like as much the second one because it doesn't take place in Area X. Area X is this area of mystery where scientific expeditions are being sent and weird shit happens to them. Now in book 2, we are in an office setting essentially within the Southern Reach, which is the organization that is studying this area of mystery that is threatening humanity. But guess what? Even though we're in an office setting, shit is just as crazy, things are just as weird, maybe even weirder, because my expectations were that it was going to be a book that maybe is a little bit boring. It wasn't. Not for me anyway. I'm not recommending this one hard to everyone because it's very specific. Jeff Vandermeer's writing is not going to appeal to every single reader, but I really liked it. It's at number 4. Could have been higher, whatever. All right. And then there were 3. At the lowest spot on the podium, we have Philip K. Dick with A Maze of Death. Here's a book that I didn't know much about, actually, and it turned out to be possibly my favorite Philip K. Dick that I've read. I don't know, it's between this one, Ubik, and maybe Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is there as well. But this one was excellent. Very straightforward, not as crazy as Ubik. You can understand what's going on at any point. You don't have to go back and reread this book to get what's going on. So it's maybe the easiest Philip K. Dick to read. Religion is at a forefront. Very interesting spirituality. In this world, it seems like religion and God is real in a sense. Very weird book. I can't get into too much of it without getting into spoilers, but we have 14 people who become stranded on a planet. They all take these separate ships that are kind of like one-way ships to this planet, and they're just supposed to find out why they're there via message. Well, the message breaks down. Now they don't know what's going on. Why are we here? And then they kind of in Agatha Christie fashion, they start dying one by one. And I'll just end here, and you need to pick up A Maze of Death and read it. It's a great book. If you haven't read Philip K. Dick, this may be the best way to get into reading PKD. This one, along with Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which I also think is his other kind of straightforward book. So yeah, at number 3, A Maze of Death. Amazing. Now at number 2, we have my favorite read of the whole month, In the Lives of Others by T.J. Klune. What an incredible read. It's not my favorite book of the month. It's at number 2, but it's definitely my favorite reading experience. I love the characters. I loved the story. It's a retelling, a loose retelling of Pinocchio in a sci-fi setting, world many, many years into the future. I couldn't put it down. A page turner, so much fun, such vivid characters, found family vibes. My favorite, one of my new favorite characters in science fiction is in this book. His name is Rambo. Read the book. You're gonna freaking love Rambo. Oh, what a great story, great characters. You feel for them. You laugh, you cry. I mean, just an incredible, incredible fun book, and also easy in some ways. It gave me some vibes of, in the way it read, of reading Project Hail Mary. I think you're gonna enjoy, if you love that book, I think you're gonna love this one. It's completely different, but it reads just as well. So yeah, fantastic book. Maybe philosophically not as deep as some of the other books on this list, but just an incredible reading experience. So much fun. Thank you, T.J. Klune. This was awesome. And now we are at number 1. But before I reveal my favorite book in May, and I think you will agree that it's been a good reading month for me, I'm going to ask you to leave a comment below. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I talked about, that I maybe sparked an interest in you to read one of the books that I talked about. What are you reading? Leave a like, subscribe if you haven't. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's talk about my favorite book of May. And that is Ursula K. Le Guin's The Lathe of Heaven. A fantastic book, beautifully balanced between philosophy and just fun quick read. I have a full review of the book. I'm gonna link it in the description below or maybe up here if you're interested. But suffice to say, I really loved it. It's one of my favorite Ursula K. Le Guin's books. It's difficult to compare to Left Hand of Darkness, for example. That book is a little bit more dense. Lathe of Heaven just reads like a dream. It's a beautiful book. It deals with the protagonist who is someone who's struggling with his dreams. He realizes that his dreams, or at least some of his dreams, come true. He tries to control that by medication, is unable to sustain that, and is forced into psychiatric help. He hopes the psychiatrist will help him stop dreaming, stop changing the world, but this psychiatrist sees this as an opportunity to change the world in his eyes for better. And this is where the story begins. Very interesting. I definitely recommend you pick up The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula K. Le Guin. I think it's a book that isn't talked about enough, in my opinion. I really enjoyed it. I'm curious if you will. So anyway, that's it for today. Great month of reading, right? May was. And I'm excited about June. I'm already reading The Forever War. I'm almost done with it. I'm also reading the last book in the Remembrance of the Earth's Past trilogy, Cixin Liu's Deaths, and that is great. So June is shaping up to be a great month as well. But hey, this is all about May, and May was fabulous.